Well, it's a fact. The future of your leadership will be determined by the quality of your decisions. My goal is to help you grow to make even better leadership decisions. Today is part 2, determines the quality of your lives. The problem is that many of us are not great decision makers, right? The good news is this, that decision making is a skill. In other words, it can be developed. You can get better at the skill of decision making. So to strengthen our decision making muscles, we're talking about the 8 factors of great decision makers. Now, if you haven't heard the first episode, I recommend you stop, go catch that one first, and then join us again. If you already heard the first one, we will review the first of the 8 factors, and then we'll finish them off today. Factor number 1 of the best decision makers, as often as possible, number 1, we're going to avoid either or scenarios. Number 2, we're actually going to make an appointment with ourselves. We're going to decide when we're going to decide. Number 3, I recommend that sometimes you need to become your own personal advisor. Number 4, we delegate as many decisions as possible. And if we're delegating a lot of decisions, then number 5, we have to increase our tolerance for mistakes. Let's take on new information today. Number 6, I'm going to encourage you to trust the data and trust your gut. Trust the data and trust your gut. Now, you may say that sounds contradictory, and on the surface, you're absolutely right. But after diving deeper, you're going to discover that these 2 ideas, trust the data and your gut, they're actually complementary. Now, why do we trust the data? Why do we trust the facts? Why do we trust the numbers? There is a famous quote. Someone said, your intellect may be confused, but your emotions never lie to you. May I say respectfully, no disrespect to the author of the quote, but that's one of the dumbest quotes ever, right? You need data, and you need facts, and you need numbers, and you need timely information. But because you're an emotional being, your emotions lie to you all the time, right? Your emotions tell you sometimes you should yell, or your emotions tell you you should just quit, that'll show them, or you should cuss, or you should eat the whole thing. And as leaders, we must ruthlessly guard against emotional responses and what experts call cognitive biases. Now, I talked a lot about cognitive biases in my book, Winning the War in Your Mind, Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life. But I'll give you a brief review. What is a cognitive bias? Cognitive bias is a systematic error in thinking when your brain wrongly filters information through your personal experiences and preferences. It's an error in thinking. You're basically taking what you think you know, what you've experienced, and your brain wrongly processes the information. And there are dozens of cognitive biases. One of the most common and dangerous cognitive biases is what's just known as the confirmation bias. What is the confirmation bias? This is the tendency to search for and interpret information in a way that confirms your previous preconceptions. How would this play out? You might have several options to choose from in an important decision, and you know one that you want to choose. So because you want to choose it, you actually look for evidence that supports your preference. You filter everything and say, maybe I should do this because that's what you want to do. It's a dangerous bias. It's your emotions playing tricks on you. Another bias is called the status quo bias. And that's when you prefer what's known over the unknown, even when the alternative options are objectively better. We've all been there, right? The status quo bias drives you to be afraid of change, and it actually creates a ceiling on organizational progress. I'll give you another one. There's the anchoring bias. What is the anchoring bias? It's when you place too much weight on the first information you received about the subject. I found that I'm actually vulnerable to this. Someone gets to me first, and they're loud, and they're confident, and so I may not listen as objectively or consider counter arguments because the first person seemed so convincing. Now, this may sound obvious, but we need the right information to make the right decisions. And there's the old saying, you've heard it before, and that is, you don't know what you don't know. So what do? Well, you study the data, start with the numbers, study the numbers, internalize the numbers. The numbers don't lie. Then, Ask questions to your team members and listen. Now that you may say, well, like who exactly do I listen to? And I would say not just your top leaders. In fact, more often than not, you're going to want to listen to the people closest to the problem or the opportunity. Sometimes the leaders in the corner office, they really are clueless as to what's really going on in the organization. So you don't want to just listen to those that are nearest to you. You want to go deep in your organization, find the people on the front lines that are actually dealing with the issues and listen to them. Whenever I do that and ask questions of people that are deeply involved, I'm always shocked at all the things that I don't know about what they're facing. And when I do know, it helps me to be better informed and makes better decision. Now, once you've done the hard work and you've studied the data, and you've analyzed the numbers and you've listened to people, then trust your gut. Analyze the data and trust your gut. And many leaders don't recognize that trusting your gut is actually more scientific than not. Why? Because your gut, it draws on, it reads, it interprets both objective and subjective information, especially if you're a seasoned leader. If you've been in your role for 3 years, 5 years or more, your gut is generally not just a quick reaction. It's more of a cultivated and it's more nuanced based on years of experience. For example, I've been in ministry for almost 3.5 decades. That means I'm pretty old. Now, I can walk into any Life Church campus. There's 45 of them. I can walk in on a Sunday morning during church, and it's crazy, but I can determine within minutes what's working and what needs improvement. I can feel it. I can sense it. Small details jump out, and it's almost like they're shouting at me. And this isn't because I've got super spiritual powers. It's not because I'm smarter than anybody else. It's because I've made hundreds of visits over the years. And over time, I come to recognize that my gut, my intuition, it does three things. What does my intuition do? Number one, it recognizes patterns. Number two, it connects experiences. And number three, it processes subconsciously. Let me say these again, because what happens is once you've been in the game for a while, you kind of go, I'm just feeling and sensing, and this just seems, what's happening? Internally, you're recognizing patterns. You've seen this before, and so intuitively you're thinking, this is probably what's going to happen next. You're connecting experiences. He said this and she said that and I saw this, and intuitively you're connecting those experiences. You're processing subconsciously. You don't know it, but your mind is working on all that you've heard, seen, experienced, and it's spitting out what's often a very, very wise choice or decision. Why does it work this way? Because your brain is excellent at recognizing patterns. Even the patterns that you don't consciously perceive, you can just kind of feel it. And you almost connect experiences at this deep level because your brain has accumulated a wealth of knowledge and experience over time, and it's just processing the information subconsciously. So behind the scenes right now, you've got some decision to make, and your brain is working right now on a problem or a decision, and then one day the solution emerges as a gut feeling, and it's often surprisingly brilliant. It's almost impossible to explain, but if I go and meet with a church campus staff, so we have 45 of them, and there would be a team of like 7 team members to 20, depending on the size of the campus. I have them ask me questions. I walk into a meeting and they ask questions, and I can accurately assess the health of that organization after the first 3 questions, just by the questions that they ask, because I've done it over and over and over again, and I can intuitively feel with a high degree of accuracy what's happening that's right and what needs to be adjusted. The same is true when I greet church members in the lobby when I visit one of our locations. I can tell what's working and what needs to be improved by the things that they say, and more importantly, by the things that they don't say. And the reason is because I had literally thousands of short conversations. At a healthy church campus, the church members, they always mention staff members by name. They say, oh, Pastor Bobby, he came to minister to me when I lost my granddad. Or Sarah, she was really involved in my life. They mention staff members by name. At a struggling campus, they rarely mention staff by name. At a strong campus, they use inclusive language. They say, oh, Pastor Greg, I love our church. At a developing campus, they'll say, oh, I love your church. And these things shout at me. You do the same thing. You meet someone and you just intuitively think something's not quite right here. Or you meet someone and you say, I've got a good feeling about that. That's your intuition working it. Trust the data and study the data and trust your intuition. Now, on a side note, for those of you that are married, and this is a total side note, I would say listen to your spouse. There are things that your spouse will see that you don't see. They know you better and they care. I cannot tell you the number of times where I've been off in one direction and Amy says, I don't have a good feeling about this. And she was right. Or she'll say, hey, I really think you should. And she was right. Now, once you observe, once you listen, once you ask, once you absorb, once you learn, over time, your gut becomes a very strategic tool in wise decision making. So what do? You do them both. You both trust the data and you trust your gut. Number 7, this is important, pre-decide as many decisions as possible. In fact, that is a theme of my new book. It's called Think Ahead, 7 Decisions You Can Make Today for the Life That You Want Tomorrow. Think ahead, pre-decide. One of the greatest enemies of quality decisions is actually making too many decisions. Now, this is shocking and it's hard to believe. I write about it in the book, Think Ahead. On average, you make about 35,000 decisions every single day. It's almost hard to believe. And that's why you often make bad decisions, because cognitive scientists call this problem decision fatigue. What do we know about decision fatigue? It's very, very real. We know this. As the volume of your decisions increase, the quality of your decisions decrease. The more decisions that you make, the lesser the quality of your decisions actually become. In fact, the New York Times wrote about a study where they looked at a panel of 3 parole officers. And what this study did is it analyzed 1,100 decisions made by these 3 officers. And what's interesting is they made the same decision 1,100 different times. Their decision was, do I approve or deny parole for prisoners? So they had 1,100 different inmates come in, and 1,100 different times they had to make a decision. The result is 1/3 of the people up for parole were granted parole. Now, here's what's fascinating. Here's what we discovered. The inmates reviewed early in the morning got parole 70% of the time. The inmates reviewed late in the day were paroled less than 10% of the time. Mind-blowing. If you showed up at 9 in the morning, there was a 70% chance that you were going to get out. If you showed up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there was a 10% chance you were going to get out. Why? Because the committee got worn out. Maybe they were tired of hearing excuses. Maybe they were just grumpy as the day went on. Maybe they were hungry at the end of the day. Maybe they were thinking about getting home to their family. Whatever it is, they were worn out. And this is why you can make good decisions all day long at work. And then you can come home and explode at those you love the most, or binge eat or binge watch some show you make bad decisions. So what is a solution? And a solution is you can pre-decide. Now, how do you pre-decide and what does this mean? In my book, Think Ahead, we have a key statement, and that is this. You will decide now, as often as possible, you will decide now what you will do later. How does this play out? For example, you may say, whenever you're faced with blank, you're faced with a certain situation, I have pre-decided to blank. I'll take this action. Whenever you're faced with this situation, I have pre-decided to take this action. And then you just fill in the blanks. In some ways, what are you doing? You're actually automating your decisions. How do you do this? Where do you start? Well, you're going to start with your values. What do you value most? Start with your values. To determine your values, you might ask yourself some questions like these. Are you primarily people-focused or task-driven? It's a good question. Are you primarily competitive or collaborative? You might ask yourself more pointed questions like this. What qualities do I admire most in others? You might ask yourself, what do I do that makes me most proud or fulfilled? We're going to ask specific questions that will help you determine your values. Now, I want to offer you something that can be very helpful. If you want help in determining your values, our team has compiled a whole list of questions to guide you toward your leadership, your organizational, and your core values. These questions are included in the leader guide. If you don't get the guide, go to life.church/leadership podcast, and we're going to give you an extensive list of questions to help you discover your values. Start with your values. Why? Why do your values matter so much in decision making? Because when your values are clear, your decisions are easy. This is super important. When you're more clear about what you value, what you stand for, it brings clarity to the decisions that you make. How does this play out? You might say, because I value relationships with people, whenever I greet a coworker, I'll always lead with a question and listen before I speak. What are you doing? You're saying, whenever I'm faced with this situation, I interact with somebody, I have pre-decided I will lead with a question and I'll listen before I say something. Or you might say, like, I value good stewardship and my marriage. We're going to be wise with our finances and we're going to have good communication. So you pre-decide. Whenever I'm considering making a purchase over, you tell me how much, $100, $300, whatever it is for you. Whenever I'm going to make a purchase over this amount, I'll always talk to my spouse and wait 3 days before making a decision, or 5 days or 30 minutes, whatever it would be for you. But when I face this situation on this purchase, I've pre-decided this will be my action. Or you might say, because I value my health and I want to eat better. There's a problem though. I tend to eat whatever's available. I've pre-decided to always have these snacks available. And that's something for me, always in my drawer. I've got the snacks I want, always stocked there because I eat what's available, so I've pre-decided that's what I want to eat. If someone asks to meet with you, your values may determine your response. You may pre-decide, I don't take meetings during certain blocks of time because that's my decision-making time or my brainstorming time or when I'm most creative. Or you might pre-decide, my meetings don't last more than an hour. If you want to meet with me, we're going to block off for an hour. Or based on your values, one person asks for a meeting and you say, I'm going to drop everything and meet immediately. Or you've got different values. You're going to say, hey, except for emergencies, I don't take meetings in the week that people request. I'm proactively designing my week. I'm not going to be reactive to what other people want. But your response is determined by your values. And so when you face a certain situation, you pre-decided a certain action. In the book, Think Ahead, we talk about 7 specific decisions you can make today for the life you want tomorrow. It is written from a Christian perspective, so I want to be clear with that, but I believe the book can really help you to make some decisions ahead of time that'll make you more effective in the future. Why? Because one of your greatest leadership tools to master the art of strategic decision-making is to pre-decide, to think ahead, to decide now what you will do later. So today we talked about trusting the data and trusting your gut. They seem like they are counter ideas, but they're actually complementary. We talked about pre-deciding as many decisions as possible. And number 8, if you'll allow me, because of my faith, if you'll allow me to speak from a spiritual perspective, I would say this. Number 8, you're faced with a decision. Do what's right and trust God with the results. Do what's right and trust God with the results. I'll shoot very straight with you. As a leader, you're going to have some very, very difficult decisions to make. And your decisions matter so much. Your decisions can impact a lot of people. Whatever you choose impacts your time and your family and your financial future, your reputation, your integrity, your legacy. Your decisions impact not just you, but your decisions impact your team. Your decisions can make their lives better, or you can make their lives worse. You can make their workplace a place they want to be, or a place they'd rather not be. And what we know about your decisions is this: you can make your decisions, but you cannot control the outcome. You can do what you think is right, but even though you do what you think is right, it doesn't guarantee the outcome that you want. And you can't control how people are going to respond. So what do? You do the hard work, you study, you ask the questions, and if you're a person of faith like I am, you can pray and you can ask God for wisdom. The number one prayer request I have is, God, give me wisdom. And scripture says in James 1:5 that if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault. It will be given to you. God, give me wisdom. You pray for wisdom, and then what do? You make the decision and you trust God with the result. Now, Before I wrap up, there's so much to learn on this subject. I've actually recorded an exclusive bonus episode called Discovering Your Decision-Making Style. This is free only to those of you in our leadership community, and I'll tell you about the content. Based on my research, there are 5 specific and different styles of decision-making. And most of you have a dominant style and a secondary decision-making style. What are the 5 styles? There's the lone wolf decision-maker, there is the researcher, there is the includer, there is the consensus builder, and there is the intuitive. What I'm going to do in this exclusive episode, I'm going to help you discover your decision-making style. I want to help you understand the strengths of your style and manage the weaknesses of your style. Then I want to help you create a specific plan to grow in the art of strategic decision-making. Now, if you're currently receiving our emails and you get the leader guide, you'll automatically receive this exclusive bonus episode. If you don't, you can go to life.church/decision-style, life.church/decision-style, and we'll send that bonus episode to you. Now, why are we obsessing about our decision-making? The reason is because the future of your leadership will be determined by the quality of your decisions. So we have titles at our workplace, right? Like maybe you have the CEO or the CFO or the COO. I'm going to give you a new title. What are you? You are the CDMO, okay? You are the Chief Decision-Making Officer of your future. You're in control. You can choose today the life that you want tomorrow. You can choose today the leadership impact that you want to have tomorrow. So let's start deciding. And chances are, as you do, you're going to be like me. You'll likely be afraid of making an imperfect decision. What if I make a decision that's not right? Here's a little secret, and that is very few decisions are ever perfect. This is a challenge. I want you to remember this. The pursuit of wise decisions will propel you forward, but the pursuit of perfect decisions will eventually limit you. If you find yourself asking, like, which option is best? Let me give you a little secret. This is really important. Which option is best? Sometimes, even often, the option you believe in the most is the option that's going to be the best. Let me say it again. What do I do? I've got this option, this option. They both seem pretty good. Which one's best? Often the one that you believe in the most. And I always tell our team this. I'd rather see full commitment to a decent plan than minimal commitment to a strong one. I want to